That's right.
Bruchim Aboyim, welcome everyone. So today is Veterans Day. I don't know if you say Happy Veterans Day.
Yes, yesterday was.
What?
Yesterday.
Yesterday was, right, yesterday was. But there was nobody remarked about it, so I thought I'll just mention it today. And so those veterans, thank you very much for your service, and we certainly appreciate what you've done to secure our country. So my uncle Morris, years ago, haircuts were 50 cents, and he walked past the barber shop, and the sign in the window said, haircuts 25 cents. So he couldn't pass up the bargain. Uncle Morris went inside, and the barber cut one half of his head. So Uncle Morris said, what's going on? He said, well, for half or 25 cents, you get half the head. If you want the other half, it's another 25 cents.
Is that a true story?
What?
Is that a true story?
True story. This is my Uncle Morris. He should rest in peace. Corey Booker. We used to be friendly with Corey Booker because the city of Newark was a customer of ours, and we got to know Corey a little bit. He used to always wish me a good Shabbos and happy holiday and so on in Yiddish. He used to say that God created a few beautiful heads. The rest of them he covered with hair. So we're going to talk about that today, about shaving of the head, shaving of the beard, and the initial basis for it in the Torah. One short pasuk. This is in Parshas Kedoshim. It says, "Lo sakifu asroshem, lo sashchis es pas dekonecha," that you should not round the corners of your head and do not destroy the corners of your beard. So it's important to get that there's a distinction there, right? With the beard it says destroy, with the payas it doesn't say destroy. So that's going to be important to remember. And so Rashi says about that, what is it talking about? That's somebody who levels off or makes even the hair from the back of his ear and to his forehead. V'nimtza hakev rosho ogol soviv. So he makes the head round, right? Shalachure ozne ikres aro lamala mitzadav harbe, because from the roots, from the hair and above, that's where the majority of the hair is going to be. And then he says pa'asakancha. What does it mean? Sofa zakon gvula, the end of the beard and its boundaries. And the hein chamesh, and there are 5. Shtayim b'chol lechi v'lechi, 2 on each side. On the corner, lamala etzel harosh hu rachav yeshbo shepat peos. That's 2 corners of the jawbone, 2 of the above at the temple, and then the bottom one on the chin makes 5. So the discussion about, first we're going to start with those of the head, and there's a question, what is the reason for the mitzvah? So Rambam was a real innovator, a very brave man, because from the time of the Gemara until Rambam came along and wrote down his listing of the 613 mitzvos, there was not a lot of literature being published, not a lot of scholarship being written down for people. And you had, between the time of the Gemara and the Rambam, you had the Gaonim, but there wasn't really a lot going on. But the Rambam took it on himself, really, to list the 613 mitzvos and give explanations for them and how they're to be practiced. So, as you can imagine, he had his own attitudes, but a lot of people had attitudes towards him as well. So what does he say? He says, Ein magachin paase harosh, k'moshohi osin ovdei kochavim. We do not cut the sideburns, the side of the head, as the idol worshippers did. She'nemar lo sakifu paas roshem. And he's quoting the pasuk, the verse in Torah, do not round the corners of your head. And he continues further, derech kohane ovdei kochavim, the way or the style of the priest of the idol worshiper, to destroy their beard, right? Therefore, the Torah because of the actions of the priests of the Avodah Zarah, that's why the Torah made it forbidden for us. So that's a problem, because Rambam is saying to us that the Torah doesn't give a reason, just says not to do it. So, and then continuing on, this is the next source that they're quoting is Sefer Mitzvos Gadol. That is a book that elaborated on what Rambam had to say. And he said, what is it? Shelo legalech pe'as harosh, kamo shayu osin komrei avodah zarah. As the do not do what the priests of the avodah zarah did, that they would cut off the sideburns of the side of the head. Lo sakifu pe'as roshchem. Do not shave off, or do not round off the corners of your head. So the idea that Rambam is giving us a reason for the mitzvah, that's problematic, because are we supposed to look for reasons for mitzvah? So the Tur, who was 13th century, 14th century in Cologne, said hakafas harosh v'ashchasas hazakan, rounding the corners of the head and destroying the beard. Gam be'elu kasav Rambam. So in the two of these, Rambam wrote that Rambam wrote, and we just read it, that the reason we don't do it is because this is what the idol worshippers did. In Cain, if so, ze'enam flourish, ein anu tzrichin levakesh tam lemitzvos. And he makes a pretty harsh statement in a way. He says it's not written anywhere that that's the reason, and we do not need to search for reasons of the mitzvahs. Ki mitzvahs melachem oleinu ach lo neda tam, because they are the commandments of the king, whether we have a reason for it or not. Okay, and this idea, this discussion about what's the reason for the mitzvah, there are a lot of different opinions about it. I'm just going to read you one from one of the commentaries, Rabbeinu Bachai, and I'm glad that they're. Pardon?
Isn't that true of all mitzvot?
Sure. So he's saying, so that's why I said that the Rambam, this is not the only instance where he's giving a reason for a mitzvah, but the Torah doesn't. And so he was criticized for that. The fact that he came out and made such a statement gives room for people to say that that's not exactly what we ought to be doing. Okay? So, just to mention, this is Rabbeinu Bachai, and he writes on the same pasuk that we're talking about. He says, "His hirakasa begulach shnei ha'tzudadim," that to remove the on both sides of the head, bein b'fnei atzon, bein below gilach harosh, whether to cut the payas, whether you shave the head or not, bein im gilach harosh ke'echad, whether you shave the entire head, gilach shnehem lo ke'shtayim. So if you cut both your payas, you would get lashes, malchus, for two averos. You get two sets of malchus. So, and then when it comes to the beard, this is an interesting one, and I'm glad that there are women here to hear this, because what does he say? Al derech hapshat, basically the literal translation, Tama Yisr Kadesh Lo Yavatel Asiman Chakadosh Baruch Hu Rasham B'Mina Zachar, that not to destroy the symbol, the recognition that God placed in males, right? So, because Kedei Lahavti Lo Mimina Nekeva, so to be able to differentiate between the men and women, right? We were on the phone this morning with my little grandson in California, and my son is trying to get him to understand what's a male, what's a female. Is Bubby a female? Bubby's but what one of those ways that we can recognize, he says, Ki ha'oseh kein hefach Hashem hu oseh k'mi shezorea kvilayim, because if you mix them up, it's just as if you are planting hybrids, which we're not allowed to do. B'chol masha asa masha bracious, and you deny everything that was done in the creation of the world, because it says by kosav lahem leminehu, in its kind. In other words, Hashem created them male and female, and we're not to be confusing which is which. V'yu Omar Esikoncha Haisa Hashchasas Kol Azakan Belav, and if it says just the beard, Avolafish Omar Espaas V'yesh B'zakan Chamisha Peyos, that not only does it mention the beard, it also mentions the peyos, which have there are 5 different spots in the beard. Avolafish Omar Espaas V'yesh B'zakan Chamisha Peyos, Shtaim B'yamin, Shtaim B'smol, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, Lachas Lamata, 1 on the bottom. So, but basically he's saying that, he's not saying this is the reason for the mitzvah, but it's important to understand that a beard is one of the ways that we can differentiate between what is a male and a female. Certainly outwardly, when we're dressed, that's the basic way that you could tell what's a male and a female. So, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he says, "Vani Omer, the Chaslei the Rambam l'Mahaspir," and he said, God forbid that Rambam is giving the reason for the mitzvah, that without that reason, because if that reason is not there, and who has more respect for the Torah than the Rambam himself? And he says, he's talking about certain mitzvahs which are hard to understand. So one of them is Me'ilah. Me'ilah means if you misappropriate property of the temple, or the mitzvahs of Tmura, where you exchange one animal for another. So let's say I set aside an animal to be brought as an offering, and I have a nice sheep, and then I have another sheep that I say, well, I want to exchange that one for this one. That's called Tmura. That's not permitted. And the Rambam mentions these, explains them without giving any reasons for them. So obviously, the idea of needing a reason is not for what Rambam needs. He says, "Mashalo nimsalo tam." In these cases, he doesn't give a reason. That whether there's a reason given or there's not a reason given, we're obligated to fulfill those mitzvahs because they are the decree of the king, and we are obligated to follow them. And he says in the end that we're talking about the rounding of the head, and it was cutting the peyos and destroying the beard. So don't believe that that's the reason for it, but he said that's parenthetically that happens to be a fact. And going on, this is called the Bayit Chadash's Babach, who was writing in Poland in the 17th century. He said, Amlam b'sefer minyan mitzvos, the book of the listing of all the mitzvos. They said Mavor Delfishin is Bar La Rav, so it's talking about, which was clear to when he says Harav, he means the Rambam. Hayosin Komri Avodah Zorah, Shoyim Megalchen Seir HaTzedoyim, that the priests of the idol worshippers would shave the temples. Habein Midato Ki Gamza Osro HaKosav Kadesh Lo Leilech V'chukim HaGoyim. So the reason, why did the Rambam mention that one of the factors in shaving of the peyos is because the goyim did it, or because the priests of the goyim do? Because there's an additional prohibition not to do what the goyim do. It's called chukas hagoyim. You're not supposed to do what they do. So not only if you shave your peyos, not only are you violating the negative commandment to shave the peyos, but you also get another one. So that's why Rambam throws it in there to let you know that not only are you liable for the payas themselves, but also that you were involved with chukas hagoyim. So, and then he says, and he's the Beis Yosef, that's the Shulchan Aruch. He said, "Nachanu ela shelo nimsa mizeh midivrei Rambam." But I didn't see this from what the Rambam wrote. In other words, he's saying himself that, in my opinion, this is why the Rambam wrote it. I haven't seen Rambam actually say it, but it makes sense to me. And so I will look Masha Kasati who refers to Sifar. It's clear to me, says the Bach, that even though Rambam doesn't say specifically or explicitly that that's why I said it, you can see from everything that is written that this is the attitude that he has. So the next one is we're going to mention the yes, Larry.
So doesn't this open us up to, I guess, inconsistencies? Like in the 60s, I remember a TA in Baltimore when the style was to have short sideburns,
Right,
the Rebbeim said, you can't have short sideburns, you have to go long. And
Right.
then in the late 60s, when it was to have long ones, they said, no, you have to cut them, you have to have them short, because
Right.
you can't look like the guy will. So this causes an issue because it makes us look, it makes Torah look, if that's what they're saying, that we don't make any decisions, we just want to be different. So it causes that,
so
problem when you use that as a reason.
right, I get what you're saying, and by the way, there is a certain idea that we do not want to look like them, right? I mean, we all dress like everybody, but there are people, and we know lots of them, who do not dress like everybody else dresses.
Well, they do,
Because
they dress like the guy of the 1800s.
15th century Polish
That's
noblemen,
what,
right.
that's what they're doing.
Right. So, in fact, what was one of the reasons why the Jewish nation survived in Egypt? Because they did not change what? Their names
Right.
and their dress, right?
Right.
So that's an important consideration, and I think we probably have a picture of me back in the day with the mutton chops and the long mustache on the whole, right? That was the style at that time. But I hear what you're saying, and we're going to get in a few minutes into the actual dimensions of the payas and how we're supposed to the different opinions on what they should be. So he says now he's quoted. This is the Taz, who was the son-in-law of the Bach. That's one we just mentioned. Now his son-in-law had what to say. He said, "Kosav Rambam she'asram hakosav mipnei she'osin kain ovdei kochavim." He says that my father-in-law, and the Rambam says that Rambam wrote this because this is what the Goyim did, right? But it's not spelled out explicitly. V'nireh, and it seems to me, the bezeh cholek im Rambam, that it seems like maybe my father-in-law is disagreeing with the Rambam, because the Rambam told din zeb ovdei kochavim shu chok shalahem, because it is one of their rules, right? Im ken yesh lepamim heter mishum shalom malchus. So now we know this. This is certain things that we do because we want to get along with our neighbors, and sometimes it's even worse than that, because not always in history was there a Jewish state. You know, this is the first time in thousands of years. So Jews were always had to be concerned about getting along with the government. So sometimes there were certain things that, in order to keep the peace, Kamosha Matzinu, so we found other places, and that's why according to the Torah, the reason is not spelled out, because it's not says that because it's what the Goyim do, because if a reason is mentioned, then you can say, well, the reason doesn't apply right now, and therefore I can do this, right? But if there is no reason given, then there's no way out, right? You have to observe it the way that it's written, right? So el bishur iser mishum chukas of their kavim. We don't go by that, right? Bir devar lo. He says ladas atur alibur Ramban ein anu tzrichim l'kayim mitzvah kol she'ein anu yodim hatam. So you're going to say that the Rambam is saying that if we do not know the reason for a mitzvah, we don't have to follow the reason. He says shtur yachshov kain b'das Rambam, that it's impossible that the Torah could think that about the Rambam. The Rambam is giving a reason because that's why we do it. If the reason is not there, so he says chassid, right? So, and now he's bringing up what we mentioned before about the fact that the reason that it's important to note is that if we just understood from the pasuk ourselves, we come up with our own idea, and maybe one of the ideas would be because we don't want to be dressing the way women dress, right? So if a man has a beard, it shows what his gender is, right? And so he says that could be one of the reasons that we want to keep the beard, to maintain the difference, the distinction between men and women. So that's the Torah. Now let's see in the Gemara. The Gemara says, this is in Masechta Makos, Hamakif Pas Rosho. So what does it mean? It means rounding the corners of the head. Tana Rabban, the rabbis learned, Pas Rosho, Sof Rosho. It's the end of the head. What does that mean? We're going to get to it in a second. Ve'ezu sof rosho, what is the end of your skull, basically your head, right? He says, Zeh mashvet tzeda'av la'achari ozno lepadakto. That's somebody who evens off the temple to the back of the ear and the forehead. So Rashi says, what does that mean? Be'ez inyan yehei makif sof harosh. How do you end the end of the head, right? Shehei chaya, that you should be reliable for shaving the head. He says, that's achore ozno ein seir klum. Back of your ear, there's no hair, right? There's no hair behind the ear at all, right? So if it came to mitzcho, also on your forehead, there's no hair. Ein seir klum, right? The tzeda'av, but on the temples, right? Shevet emsa yesh seir, because there is hair, right? V'im ho mashve v'notel kol seir shevet tzeda'av lemidas achari ozno v'dakto. And if he removes all the hair from the temple to make it even with the back of the head, or the back of the ear, or the forehead, zehu makiv sof harosh. That is what is rounding off the corners of the head. And so the bone of the temple, according to them, they say that the skull is up to that point, and then below that is the face itself.
It's like Mo in the Three Stooges. Mo in the Three Stooges.
Mo and the Three Stooges?
What about Moses?
I don't think it doesn't know from the Three Stooges.
Mo
You don't
was-
remember?
Right. Also Friar Tuck and the Robin Hood movies, right? So what does it actually look like?
Oh,
So here we have three different examples of how this mitzvah is observed, right? So we have this one which leaves the entire payas, that's number A, right? B is the middle of the like opposite the middle of the ear where the temple is, and the lower one all the way in the bottom. We're going to see who holds with each of these different opinions. You know,
We're just arguing about where the temple is.
Where the temple is?
Where do you think the temple is?
so there is a bone which,
That's
like
not
it's
your temple. Your
That's-
temple is the soft spot over here, by your eye.
Next to your eye.
So he's telling me that's the medical one, the one here.
so I'm going to tell you what they say
Okay.
and how they view it. So the Rivan in the Masechta Makos, it's very interesting because Rashi actually passed away in the middle of doing his commentary on Makos, and his son-in-law took over. The son-in-law's name he was called the Rivan. So that's this one. And what does he say? He says, Ezehu sof rosho, what is the end of the head, end of the skull, that part? Is Eze inyan yehe makif sof harosh yehe chayav beval takifu. So what is that spot? He says, Hamashvet sto acharei ozno levadachto. He said it's somebody who levels off or evens off the temple, the back of the ear and the forehead. Acharei ozno ein seir klum. Behind the ear there's no hair. V'chein b'mitzcho ein seir klum. And in the forehead there's no hair. So aval b'tzdav shebe'emtza. But in the temples, right, which is in the middle, yesh seir. Imhu mashve v'notel kol ha-seir shebe'tzdav lemidas acharei ozno badakto. And if he removes the hair, which is opposite the forehead or opposite the back of the ear, zemakiv sof harosh. That is somebody who is destroying the end of the head. And we're going to go a little further. We're going to get to what they call what the temple is called. So, and the Rambam continues, says, shear. There was no measure, no minimum standard as to how much hair needs to be left in order. If you remove some hairs, is it okay if you take off some of the hairs, not all the hairs? Shamanu mizikneinu. I heard from our elders, says the Rambam, you have to leave no fewer than 40 hairs. In other words, if you remove some of the hair, but you leave at least 40 behind, then you're okay. Umuta lalaked apayos b'misparayim, and you're allowed to cut the hair on your payos with scissors, right? Lo neser ela hashkachas v'tar, but the only negative restriction commandment is not to use a razor, right? So if you wanted to cut your payos with scissors and leave 40 hairs behind, says the Rambam, that's probably okay. But there are other opinions coming along later. So this is the Rush, who was writing in Germany in the 13th or 14th century. He says, "Midalosh aminu lo me roshe alma hakafas harosh afilu b'misraimos." Basically he's saying, where does the idea come along that scissors is okay? And why does he say that? Because if you remember, we read the pasuk. It says that you should not round the corners of the head. Do not destroy the beard. So using scissors is not destruction, right? Destruction. We're going to get to that in a little bit. What that really means. But therefore, it seems like any method of removing the hair, says the Rush, from the payas is not permitted. The beard is different. There are different rules with the beard because the word hashkasa is in there, destruction. So now the Rav Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he says, "Kasav Rambam she'enu chayav el v'tar." So Rambam says only a razor is b'sof hilchos avodah zara, and his rules about avodah zara, kasav v'zel shona mutar l'laked apeh b'misparayim. You're permitted to cut your payas with scissors. And also others have accepted that reasoning. He says, because you're only liable if you use a razor. And then it says there's a difference between the corners of your beard and the corner of your paya. Okay, so now we're going to get into the exact dimensions. What we have listed over here. Hamakiv pas rosho ala rosh shayim achas mikan v'achas mikan. So the payas there are only two, right? One on either side, right? So the Rivan, that's this one. He says ala kafas rosh chayiv shtei malkios the shtei payos yesh lo rosh, that if you cut both of them, you're going to get malchus twice because you are violating. Each one has its own rule, and he says, He says, "Makam aseir chaticha achas, makam apanim hazakan chaticha achas." Like the bones of the head, he's saying that the upper part, the skull itself, is one piece, and then the jaw is another piece, and he says. It says zu b'tzada ozen, alongside the ear, milafana makom shelo ozen, and this word he's using ozen is Rashi and the Rivan lived in France, and he uses an abbreviation very often. He'll say Laz Lashon Amzar, the language of a strange nation. In other words, he's giving you French, and what does he call it? Temple. He says the temple is the joint, the place where the bone of the skull and the bone of the jaw come together. So medically, they're not talking about that. They're talking about the location, right, where they say this is the end where you should go. He says V'sham nikra peah shishon sof harosh makam chibur haparakim. This is where the pieces join together, right? V'nimtza sheyesh lo shtei peos. Sida mikan and sida mikan. Each side of the head has one payah, and the chayav aleim shaim, and he's required to do. If he violates it, there's two restrictions there. So now, a 20th century posek. This is Beis Lechem Yehuda. He's talking about what the Arizal had to say. The Ari from famous Kabbalist from Tzfat. He says, "Hayanoig v'inyan peyas harosh." His custom in terms of the peyah, v'begov hayamaniach kashir, and he would leave a certain height. Im yakumu haznayim lamala v'rosh ad osa hamakon v'yosim at lamala. So he was number A, totally above the ear, and a little bit more. So the Ari said that this is the standard, that it should be above the whole ear, and a little bit more. Okay, that's number A. That's the Ari, and then Rashi is saying he's al kafas rosh shtaim to have payas. There's two payas. Upeya loshon sof the kotzehu kamo. He's lepayas lifas yam lifas negev. He says it's like the border between the sea and the desert. Mokom chibur hagogolos. Hagogolos imalechi. The location where the skull joins together with the jaw. V'zeh, right? V'hein makom atzdoin, and that is the location. So it's where the skull and the jawbone come together. So that's number B. That's Rashi, right? So you see it's right like in the middle, opposite the middle of the ear. And then the Rashi's son-in-law wasn't happy with that. So they always say don't start off with your son-in-law. His son-in-law disagreed. He said there are 5 peos, 5 corners to the beard. Echad lamata, one on the bottom. Mina osen makom shalechi haschanon yotze imisporet sham. That basically he's saying that it should be at the bottom, the entire bottom of the ear, like the lower edge of the ear is where he says it's got to be. He says v'sham nikra peya v'chudo shalechi. That he says that is the sharp edge of the jawbone, right? Because the jawbone towards the right, going towards the back is a sharp edge there. He's at that point, that's opposite the bottom of the ear. So he says that is the location of where the payos end. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch continues, and he says, got it? We all have the 3 locations, right? And the 3 different. So this one is the Arizal, who's saying it's the entire ear plus. Rashi saying basically towards the middle of the ear, and his son-in-law the Rivan says the lower part of the ear. So that's why you'll see today yeshiva kids coming with the sideburn all the way down to the bottom of the ear, because that was the more strict observance. So when I was yeshiva, this is okay, but now it's become this one. So good luck, whatever. Okay. So it's a shir apeh mechaneged sar shal padachtov ad lamata min ozen. So he says from the middle to the bottom of the ear, says Shulchan Aruch, mokom shalechi v'eschanan yotze misparit sham. And he says this again. The Rivan is where the jaw, where this part where the jawbone joins to the skull, and further on. This is another one. This person is called Aseh Lecha Rav. This is Rabbi Chaim David Alevi, who's contemporary. He says, "Nira psak kain hu lo min adin mama." That's not. I don't get that exactly. She came l'shon of a bias. The Beis Yosef ena mora came, because the Beis Yosef himself doesn't seem to indicate that. Zu lashon zehirusi. So he's saying that the Shulchan Aruch, when he's saying the lower edge over here, he's being extra strict. He says, because he says, below lashon isur, and it's not really forbidden to have it a little bit higher, because of kain mishum shehu sveika the oraisa, because the rule of not cutting the pace is a Torah rule. It's not something that came along from the rabbis. It's a Torah rule. And he says, if there is a doubt in terms of how to observe the Torah rule, you should be stricter. So he says, V'gam HaRamah, also the Ramah, another one who wrote commentary in the Shulchan Aruch, Lo Yisigo Mashma Shehiskimimo. So it seems that he agrees that this is the basic rule, but if you wanted to go this way, that's okay too, says the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so now we've established the dimensions of it, but how about the hair, if you leave behind some hair, right? Because they seem to say that you don't have to, that if you leave some hair behind, you have not violated the rule. So how long should the hair be? So the Chafetz Chaim says, Afilu mispar Yisrael, agav de Irinam ba'inam tispores, reisi lahazkir inyan echad min masha eza mehamon nechsholim bo. He says, I have to tell you, give you some information that many people are wind up violating without knowing what the rule actually is. V'hu binyan iser da kofas pas rarosh, v'kamo she'avar ki yoduat al iser kofas pas harosh, yesh gam kein lav Torah, that removing the hair of the peah, it's a negative commandment. Hu alav lo takifu pas roshem, because there's the restriction, not allowed to remove the hair of your peahs. V'yesh amrim, the peas harosh chomer od mi peas zakon, and the removing of the hair of the peah is even stricter from removing the hair of the beard, right? Because over al halav afil im avir min misparayim. Because if I cut the hair of my peas with scissors, I can still be in violation. Whereas cutting the hair of the beard with scissors is not, right? So because ke'ein tar, because if I use scissors, but I cut very close on the peah, so it's as if I cut like with a razor because I got so close. He says behind the samach lebasaro, because it's close to the flesh, and he says shemavir es peas ad samach lebasaro mamash, that when he cuts it close to the flesh itself. So in that case, you have to be careful. So okay, now you know that some of the hair is remaining. How much hair has to remain? So one would say that as long as you can feel it, right? If when you shave, and after you shave, you feel there's still some stubble there. So some say that's okay, but then others say that that's not enough. He says in kain al karchacha, you have to understand that in the Raisa lo chashiv giluach, it's not considered shaving. In kain lo nishtar kilei lekafoch roshan leikron, that the hair has to be long enough that you can bend it over, that the end of the hair can reach to because when you are removing the hair of the peas, and you have to leave behind hair that's at least long enough that you can bend it over to touch the root of the hair. Jerry, you're puzzled.
I'm thinking about that.
Okay.
When I was a teenager in yeshiva, the older boys that were in the kollel and so on, they used some kind of chemical.
Well, we're going to get to that.
It was a plastic.
We're going to get to that. Right. So what Gershon's asking about is the method by which the hair is removed. So we're talking right now about implements. So a razor in all cases is no good. The question is, can I cut the hair of my peas using scissors? Right. With the beard, it's okay. But in terms of the peas, is it okay to cut it with scissors? So they say it's okay provided you leave enough hair behind. That each individual hair, and it's got to be minimum 40, and we're going to say some say even 4, but whatever the number is, that each of the hairs has to be long enough that you can bend it over, and it can touch the base. Okay. So, you with me? 4 or 40. We're going to get there right away. So the Rambam says, "Upei azu shamanichim b'tzedoyim lo nasnu bo chacham shir." So the rabbis didn't let us know what is the dimension. In other words, you have this situation, either of these two, right? This person's not cut at all, but could he do a haircut where he makes like an angle or whatever it is, and leave some of the hair, doesn't remove all of it, but leaves some of it. So the Rambam says that we're left to figure it out for ourselves. They did not leave instruction as to what is the minimum number of hairs to be left behind. He says, "V'shamanu mizikneinu," but I heard, says the Rambam, from our elders, in other words, somebody that told him, "She'eno maniach pachos mi'arbaim sa'aros," must leave at least 40 hairs, says the Rambam. Mutar l'lak 40. We're going to get to that right away. So the Rambam says minimum of 40. Mutar l'laked ha'peos the misparayim, and you're permitted to cut the hair of your payas with scissors. Lo nesar ela hashchasa b'tar. The only problem with the payas is if you use the razor. So you can cut the payas up to leave at least 40 behind, and you can cut them using scissors. Okay. Now the Tur, who's later on in the Rambam, he says, "Kasav aramtam shir hapayas lo nasnu chachamim shir." So Rambam says that the rabbis didn't write down basically what is the minimum. V'shamanu miziknenu she'em anichem pakos misbedalad. So he heard 4. So Tur says 4, Rambam says 40, and they're going to go into a good long discussion now about how many, what length, and so on. And we're going to kind of skip that because a lot of it is, he says yesh l'dakte kan mishdivrei Rashi, so we can elaborate basically from what Rashi says. Shekasav imhu mashve v'notel kol ha'se'ar shebetzlado mashve dafka v'notel kulo. So it seems like from what Rashi is saying that removing the payas, you can take all the payas. Then you've got a problem. But if you leave behind some number, whether it's 4 or 40, it's not so clear. But either way, and it's like I said, there's a whole long discussion about that. And now when we get to the sort of a bottom line, right? Halacha afapish ein la'akchish shepashus, that the simple understanding of the Gemara is that lo takifu, you should not round the corners. Lo tigmar lahakif, you should not complete it. In other words, you can start, you can remove some, but not all of it. Mikol makom, in any event, kavar Torah Yoses mirabenu, from the Torah that comes out from the Beis Yosef, that's the Shulchan Aruch, lachsho shechol hachomros, that it's not bad to observe all of the stringencies. In other words, he's saying that there are minimums, but it's not bad to go even further. And he says that, yeah, he says, "Kol rochev hashetach," all the entire area, afil yosem imem saros, lo tiga boyad, and even this area, more than 40 hairs is not so bad not to touch it. V'hainu b'tar o b'misparayim, and whether you use a razor or scissors, k'ein tar, or scissors like a razor. So in that case, umasha manichem asaros sham aruchos mamash, and those people who leave the hairs long hairs like number A, he says, hu midivrei kabbalah b'chasidus v'kodesh yom. That is a pious way to go about it, and we consider that person a kodesh who keeps the payas long. So now, I can't cut my own payas, right? But suppose I have somebody cut them for me, or suppose I had a non-Jewish barber. What happens then? So the Shulchan Aruch says, "Gama nikav chayav im sayeya b'davar shemata atzmo elav lakifo." So when you sit in the barber chair, the person cutting the hair asks you to turn your head this way or that way. So if you're sitting in the barber chair and the non-Jew is cutting your hair, asks you to lean a certain way, and you help him, you're now liable for what he's going to be doing, right? So you're not exactly passive, right?
You're aiding him in
You're
his
helping him,
Zara,
right?
in a
You're
way.
helping him. You're helping him, and therefore you are liable just as he is. So I guess if you were sleeping and he cut your payas, you wouldn't have known about it. You can't be held responsible. But if you're sitting in the barber chair and the barber asks you to lean a certain way, whether he's a Jew or he's not a Jew, he's got the problem, but you have the problem too. Okay. So, and now the idea of keeping the custom of wearing the long payas. We see people keeping the payas long. He says, so Rabbi Soloveitchik wants to know where does this get started? Where does this come from? He said, Bikesh gam ladas mehechan makar minhagam shalela haochim b'peyos aruchos. Where does it start? Where does it come from, this idea? And we see people who wear the long payas. How do they get that idea, right? Rabbeinu Yeshivu, in our rabbis answered, Midikasav mechaber b'shulchan aruch. It says in Shulchan Aruch, v'kol rochev makom zeh lo tigat v'yad. He said this entire length, which we just read from the Shulchan Aruch, you shouldn't touch it, right? Afal pi Shaposkim danu b'zeh kamash yurim, even though the rabbis gave various different standards, he's areish lefi devarav, according to Shulchan Aruch, hidur gadolu, it's a very good way to expand on the mitzvah. Shelo liga b'peyos klal, not to touch a peyos at all. U'mela nasos a peyos aruchos, and allow the peyos to grow long.
What
Okay.
about the depilatory, because we're coming to the end?
We're going to come to depilatory right away.
Hurry up.
Oh boy. Oh, okay, so I'm just going. I just want to mention. Wow, sorry. Okay, so where do we get the custom that we wait till the boy is 3 years old, right? We have a grandson that's coming up on his 3rd birthday, and he's got these amazing blonde curls, this kid. So where does that idea come from that we wait till the boy is 3 years old? He's in a tatem called eitz ma'achol or losam or loso al period. When you plant the fruit tree, you have to wait 3 years to eat the fruit, right? Right? He said medaber betino. He's talking about a child, a small child, shalosh shanim, that he's 3 years old. At that point, yelachama arelim. Up until they're 3, they're still considered like a fruit tree who hasn't borne good fruit yet. She'ein yochol lo la'asiach lo ladaber. He doesn't really understand. But I don't know. You haven't met my grandkids, but they're talking a blue streak when they're 2 or 3 years old. But anyway, so at that point, when he finishes the 3rd year. B'shana revius, when he enters into his 4th year, kol perov. Then his fruits begin to bloom. Shavid mekadisho l'Torah. Because now the father introduces him to Torah. So we're just going to get to the depilatory, and that's one that used to be used, because there's even today most poskim accept electric shavers, right? And there's a whole long discussion about how it works, because the idea is that there are a couple of things. First of all, there's the idea of hashkasa, destroying the beard, and so anything that cuts the hair below the surface of the skin, and apparently that's what a razor does, because when you push on that razor, it's getting below the surface of the skin, removing the hair. That's called hashkasa, that's not allowed. Where scissors are operating on the surface, and you have an upper and a lower, so scissors are okay, but still in all, you don't get a good close shave with the scissors. So before electric shavers became available, they used to use a depilatory, which is a chemical that they would put on the face, and that would remove the hair. So they say that's perfectly okay. There's no problem with removing the hair using a depilatory.
It's kind of melting it, but it's not cutting it. So
Right, you're not cutting, right. But they say just be careful, they don't leave it on too long, because you can do some damage to the skin. And when it comes to the electric shaver itself, so these are all going to be basically contemporary poskim, and they say that, originally we said that the Rambam said that we don't want to be copying the Goyim, but he says today it's a normal way of shaving for Gentiles, even more than a razor. So if you're only depending upon the reason, that reason would have gone out the window. So you have to be careful, because this is what Hashem instructed us to do. And here's another one that says, Rav Yitzchak Barda says, he investigated the matter with licensed God-fearing electricians who said that this is one of the rabbis is trying to figure out how this thing actually operates. Is it working like scissors, or is it working like a razor? Because if it's working like scissors, that's okay, but if it's working like a razor, meaning it's reaching the surface of the skin or below, that's no good. So what he did is he put some ink onto his skin, and not on his face, but on his hand, and he passed the electric shaver over, and he found some of the ink was removed. So he said that seems to indicate that the shaver is reaching the surface of the skin. But he says that this other rabbi, he brought in a licensed God-fearing electrician. He said the fact that the ink was erased by the shaver is due to the heat of electricity, and not the shave or the sharpness of the blade and the appliance. Okay, and so they mention here different brands of shavers, and I know, we were told that Norelco was okay, and certain ones, yes or no, but basically, when you do shave, you should pull the skin so that the skin is taut, so that the skin is not entering into it, and so there's a lot of discussion about that, and it says some contemporary poskim suggest you can be lenient based on another difference between a shaver and a razor. The area that a razor can shave is unlimited, as one can move it across one's whole face and cut all the hair simultaneously. So if you get a long safety razor, regarding the scissors, the area in which you can operate is limited, and so electric shaver is more like scissors. But now they're asking about the lift and cut type shaver. What is that? So what's that actually doing? So there's a lot to know about it, and basically there are some lists. The Star K publishes a list, and I'm going over my time, and so I'm just going to say that if you're not sure, you can certainly ask your local rabbi if your shaver is okay. But as far as we know, Norelco is okay. Some of the other ones are maybe not. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And next time we're going to be doing Shiluach HaKan, send me away the mother bird. And I wanted to pick this one because it says it's important lizoyer mi mitzvah kala kimachamura, that you should observe the easy mitzvahs like a difficult one. And this one's supposed to be an easy mitzvah. And so we'll hear about that again next week.